المهدي المهدي قادم قادم ناصر ناصر الثروات المهدي المهدي ثائر ثائر شاهد شاهد سيف الثار المهدي المهدي فجر فجر للأحرار المهدي المهدي أمل أمل يطلق في الدنيا غيران المهدي المهدي
Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you, dear viewers. Welcome to an episode of The Awaited One, where we discuss the concept of the perfect man. My name is Sarah Bukhari and I'm your host today, and with me I have my esteemed guest, Sayyid Ali Abbas Razawi. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for joining us. So the concept of the 12th Imam al-Islam. In religion, a lot of the traditions we take are from history, are from examples of people in history and how to adapt the lessons they've left for us, albeit 1400 years ago, into our lives today, into the 21st century. With the 12th Imam al-Islam, however, there's a bit of a difficulty because he's living in our current era and perhaps a lot of people aren't aware of the traditions in his life. So kind of to develop an understanding and along that point, that line of argument, is the 12th Imam al-Islam, is there a character in history that we see that he bears the most resemblance to, that we can compare and contrast his life to?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think the question that you've asked is an important one as to the characteristics, the character of the Imam alayhi salam. See, we have a tradition actually that solves the problem for us. In the tradition it says that the Imam has characteristics of really the Prophet and the infallibles. So, for example, it says that he is the inheritor, وَصَاحِبَ دَعْوَةٍ نَبَوِيَّةٍ, invites people in the way that the Prophet would do. His courage is like Amir al-Mu'mineen. His hilm is like Imam Hassan. His patience is like Imam Hussein. So, in this way, and his ghayba is like Allah's, وَغَيْبَةِ إِلَهِيَّةٍ. So, in this way, the Imam himself has really the characteristics, I wouldn't say the best characteristics, because all of the characteristics of the Imam are the best, but he has all of those specific things that the Imams were tested in and the Imams are famous for within him. So really, if you look at the personality of the 12th Imam alayhi salam, the 12th Imam is a manifestation of all of the Imams and the Prophet. And in fact, he is then essentially what we call the perfect man. His function is different from that of the other Imams in one way and the same in the other. See, why do we have prophets? The idea of guidance. What do you need to be guided? So the prophets are Hadi. Allah's name is Hadi, the one who guides. Mahdi is the one who's guided. One is Isma Fa'il, the other one is Isma Maf'ul. The 12th Imam is Hadi and Mahdi both. The manifestation of the name Hadi is in the prophets. They guide. There's two things required for guidance, what we say in theology. The first is the free will to make your decisions want to be guided. And the second thing is the atmosphere to be guided in. Sometimes, if you don't have the free will to be guided, if you don't want to be guided, you're not going to be guided. And the same way, the second thing is very important, because if you don't have the atmosphere to be guided, what happens? You're one person who wants to make a difference. And I've seen this a lot, especially in universities, remote universities. Let's say, I don't know, let's go down to Edinburgh, or let's go to Swansea, wherever it may be, Canterbury, wherever it may be, remote places. Let's go back to my day. Obviously now you've got AppSocs and iSocs and all sorts. Let's go back to my day when I was at university. Remote places, they had hardly any Muslims there. Now there's one person who's come on the deen. Let's say they weren't on the deen, they came from an irreligious family. They want to become religious, but the atmosphere and their friends don't facilitate that. Every night your friends are going to clubs. You want to make that difference, but what happens? Eventually you get pushed into the club and you make the decision that, okay, if I go there I won't drink and I won't dance. Yes. But over a period of 3 years, what happens is that you go into regress. Why? Atmosphere. So the second thing which is important for guidance, as well as wanting to be guided, is the idea of atmosphere. Why am I taking this? Because we're looking at the actual purposes of the prophets. Now, each prophet came down to guide man, and they had two other functions. One function was in terms of social development, people. And the second thing was personal development, the human being, two relationships. So if you go back to, let's say, the Imams, or if you look at the Prophet, sometimes the Prophet would give a dua for the person. One guy comes up to the Prophet and he says, I suffer from waswas in my prayers.
Yeah.
he was breaking his prayers. What should I do? The Prophet said, recite this, and he also said that I've got financial problem. He coupled a financial problem and the waswas, and he gave him a dua specifically for this guy, mentioned in some of the books. And this guy recited it, and the finance improved and the waswas went. Now that was something specifically, the doctor was prescribing something specifically for the individual.
Yeah.
Then you have certain things which are for everyone. So for example, Dua Joshna Kabir, everyone. Dua Mujir, everyone. You've got other du'as as well, for example, Sha'baniya, for everyone. So there are certain things which are kind of universal, there's certain things which are specific. Essentially, therefore, the job of a prophet is to guide people in terms of a society and to guide people in terms of the individual. I'm going to build this up. We have 124,000 prophets. There is a difference between a Nabi and a Rasul, all right? So Nabi would be translated to as a prophet, a Rasul would be translated to as a messenger.
Yes.
We have 124,000 Anbiya, prophets, but from them we only have 313 of those who would be classified as a Rasul, a messenger. It is the messenger that takes the message to the people. It isn't, you will not find, it is not the Nabi who does that. A Nabi is a part of it. Higher up than that is a Rasul. Question is, what's the difference between them two? There's a technical difference in the fact that a Rasul is the one who takes the message to the people. Maybe he gives a Sharia to the people. A Nabi doesn't do that. A Nabi is a Nabi, sometimes even for himself, sometimes for his family. He doesn't declare it. That's why we don't have a list of 124,000 prophets.
Yeah.
We only have a specific list of a specific number of prophets who have done a big thing. Go into a Surah Kafi and you find that the prophets are broken into 4 parts. And this tradition goes back to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. It says that the first lowest level, which is a Nabi, the lowest level of a prophet is a person who within their nafs, within themselves, feels the manifestation of God, feels this wahi, this difference, God guides him. But he has not the permission to go out and to express it to people. Higher than that, second category, is a person who sees in his dream revelation. After that, you find the third category, the person who sees the revelation, feels it in himself, and hears the voice, right? And the fourth is that person who sees Jibreel himself. So it's a breakdown. The first 2 come under the bracket of a Nabi, the last 2 come into the bracket of a Rasul. So a Rasul, by definition, here is a person who can hear or see Jibreel. Question is this, what is it to see Jibreel? Is Jibreel a person? We're stemming off the topic, but I think it's important to emphasize it. So the thing is, what does it mean to see Jibreel? Jibreel is not physical. He may come down in a physical manifestation, but Jibreel is not physical. What is the concept of wahi? What does it mean? Does it mean that Jibreel comes down, you sit down with him, have a glass of water, and he discusses with you? No.
Yeah.
Jibreel is not physical. Jibreel is light, and it's not like this light which is shining around us. He's a metaphysical light. And this is where Ibn Sina basically clears it up. He says wahi happens in that part of the brain which he calls aql qudsi, holy intellect. And basically it permeates from there all over a prophet's body. And the fact is that it's divine revelation from Allah on the person. So he says that yes, Jibreel can come in a physical manifestation, but when Jibreel in his raw form comes, it's a manifestation that goes on all different levels of existence of that person. So for example, now there's another category, a 5th category, which in a Surah Kafi they call a muhaddith. Like Bibi Fatima alayhi salam was known as a muhadditha, person who can hear the angels.
Wow.
So if she's hearing the wahi which is coming on the Prophet, technically that means that she has a connection with the feelings and the emotions and the state of the Prophet to be able to take that and grasp that. And this is why you have that in that tradition, Fatimatu bad'atun minni. It's part of me. Meaning what? The entire feeling and the emotions of the Prophet, as he feels them, she knows them.
Wow.
But anyhow, that's a different debate altogether. So why am I building this up? Right, idea of guidance. There are only select numbers of prophets who have been told 313 to go into people. Two types of messengers here. So one is known as an imam, Ibrahim. Ibrahim was an imam. So in one era there were 4 prophets living. Ibrahim in Quds, his cousin, you had Lut, Sodom and Gomorrah, he was elsewhere, it was his cousin. They were both married to sisters. Sarah and Sarah's sister was married to Lut. So Sarah's sister was married to Lut, so you had two prophets.
Okay.
You had Yaqub, who was in Egypt at the time, Ismail, who was in Mecca, and Ishaq, who was with Nabi Ibrahim.
Amazing.
But Ibrahim was the Imam of all of them. And this is why when we debate it, we say Imamat is a higher rank than Risalat. And people say, well, how can you say that? No, the technical definition. Don't look at the technical definition was that Ibrahim was appointed as an Imam. Inni ja'aluka linnasi imama. He was an Imam. And he was the Imam of Lut, and he was the Imam of Yaqub, and he was the Imam of Ismail, and he was the Imam of Ismail and his son Ishaq. So in this way, he was an Imam over 4 prophets. Maqamat, Imam. Purpose of the Imam, therefore, as an Imam, as a social, political leader, as well as a spiritual guide. Now come down and break it up. There's another narration of Surah Kafi. It says that Ibrahim was an Abd first. He was a slave. Abdullah. That's the first level. Then he was a Nabi. Then he was a Rasul. Then he was a Wali. And then he was an Imam. So in this way you find that he was a friend. And then after the friend, he became an Imam, a leader over the community. So maqam imamat is such that the Imam is a divine guide over the community, over the people. And that tradition, Sunni Shias both narrate. They said, look, the Prophet of God, and both of them narrate from the Prophet of God. It says the ulama of my ummah are like the prophets of the Bani Israel. And when it comes to it, there's no ikhtilaf, because all the ulama, whether the Sunni Shia, love this tradition for whatever reason. Why? What does that mean when the Prophet says that? They're not prophets, they're not messengers, but there's something that they have, and that's wilaya. So wilaya, and then after that the concept of imamat, which is reserved for the imam. So we can see that the characteristics therefore of prophets, essentially 2 things: individual guidance, if you've been given that, and guidance for society. Now come to the imams alayhimus salam. Prophet of God comes, the most perfect of all prophets. And as Allama Tabatabai says, if you want to see all of the prophets, you want to see the perfection of Adam, and you want to see the Jalal of Nuh, and you want to see the, as one would say, the Tawheed almost of Ibrahim. You see the Jamal of Musa, or sorry, Jamal of Isa. If you want to see the beauty of Yusuf, you want to see all of these reflections, look at the final prophet. The final prophet has all of these things. And the 12th Imam is what? In the words of the Prophet, narrated by all Muslims, his kunya is my kunya, his name is my name, his characteristics are my characteristics. So the Prophet had long hair, the 12th Imam. All of those characteristics of the Prophet, where is it found? Found in the Imam Mahdi. So the characteristics of the 12th Imam, the function is different. The purpose of the 12th Imam, to establish heaven on earth. Basically, justice, government, and as we discussed last week, the 3-tier system of the environment, society, and the individual.
Yeah.
So, remember a young man, there was on a particular television channel they were discussing, and they were saying that when Imam Mahdi comes, so this young guy, 11 years old, follow the Ahlebait, he phones up and he says that, why don't you guys sit together and just elect an Imam Mahdi? They turned around and they said, well, it's a nice question, right? Why don't you elect Imam Mahdi? They said, well, no, Allah chooses Imam Mahdi. So there was a young chap, and he replied, he says, well, if Allah chooses the Mahdi, why didn't you choose the first one? Which was a good. So at least one thing is confirmed. Every one of us believes that Imam Mahdi is divinely appointed from God. He has a responsibility. So it's not the fact only prophets are divinely appointed. Imam Mahdi will be divinely appointed by God. Whether you believe in him being alive, whether you believe in him to come, whatever it is, the fact is that we all believe in Imam Mahdi as appointed. What is Imam Mahdi then? The answer lies in Sayyid al-Shuhada. I'm not going to span out too much, but when you stand in front of the haram of Sayyid al-Shuhada and you open up the book and you recite the ziyar, what do you recite? Assalamu alayka ya waritha Adama sifatullah. What are you saying? And you go one by one by one by one. You take all of those characteristics of the greatest prophets and you say to Imam Hussein, you are the successor to all of those characteristics. Now who's Imam Mahdi? He's the successor to Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam. So now take, what is the essential characteristics then? All of those shining qualities of all of the prophets and all of the imams are found in one man. And that's the 12th Imam of Islam.
The perfect man, as
Perfect
you said.
man.
Amazing explanation, thank you very much. I mean, often you hear this explanation of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, but the way you just described him, from the example of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam to that last point, that crucial point where you said they are the inheritors of all these qualities. It's not just one man. When we say perfect, we mean all of those attributes in one human being. Now you said the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, you mentioned how he specifically is a collection of all those attributes, like you said, the Jamal of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, the beauty of certain prophets in one human being. And then you carried on and said in how Imam Mahdi alayhi salam is all of that, but an inheritor of that, and how they share the same name even. From the life of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and actually, first as a more general question, is Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, in terms of practical life, does he resemble the lives, as in the way he's lived so far, the example of the previous prophets? For example, we see the miraculous birth of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, and how Imam Mahdi alayhi salam shares a similar characteristic there. So generally in the prophets, like you said, he's an inheritor, so in a practical sense, does he also share the same attributes?
Of course he does. You find in history as well that there were prophets who disappeared for a long period of time. Nabi Idris, according to some traditions, over 200 years, he was raised to the heavens and then he came back again. In fact, we have 4 prophets who are, or we could characterize them as prophets. Yeah. Nabi Idris, Ilyas, Nabi Isa, and Khidr, if you look at him as a prophet. But there are 4 people who are living today. Can anybody say that Jesus is dead? No. Idris is dead? No. Okay, fine, the debate is whether Idris and Ilyas are 2 people, but they're one person. Yeah. Because according to some ulama, Idris went up, when he came down, society had changed, language had changed completely, so people started calling him Ilyas. But that's a technical discussion, but the fact is that 3 or 4 prophets are still living today. So when you talk about the 12th Imam, these guys are also in occultation in a way. These guys are also hidden in a way. They have a purpose, they have a function. You see, when it comes to the 12th Imam alayhi salam, he guides his community, he helps his community, he's there for his community. We've experienced that. If we're alive today, it's because of him. Ask those people who have been in problems and trouble. Ask those people who were in jails in the time of Saddam, when they used to call out to the Imam, and the Imam used to help them. If the Imam wasn't alive, most of us wouldn't be sitting here today. Or at least I wouldn't be sitting. If the Imam wasn't his wujud, I wouldn't be alive today. So in this way, you find numerous people, and you speak to them, you know, when you go on the minbar, 20 people will come and say, when we were stuck and there was no way out, we appealed to the Imam and we saw a problem disappear. It doesn't necessarily mean that you see the Imam. It means that his wujud reflects on you. You feel a calmness that my Imam is with me. That's what makes that difference. To know that the Imam is with you. The Imam has not left you. It's not the fact that he's turned his head away from you. It's the fact that we're blind to him. Yes. So the Imam is there and the Imam does help. There's a time when, remember a story now, a person can achieve that, right? So the alim who wanted to meet the Imam, and he had a message, he said, look, come to me outside of this shop, Baghdad or somewhere. So this guy goes and he sees that the Imam is sitting outside. And he says to the Imam, what have you come to this shop for? He says, look at that man inside, look at his character. Woman comes and she says, this is the only lock I have and I don't have any money. Can you buy it from me? He says, if it was anybody else, they would have charged her a $5. You know what he says? He says, the value of this is £2. I'll buy it from you for £2 and I'm going to sell it for £2.50, for example. Imam says, his dealings with the people is what I like. He's not an alim, it's the dealings with the people. So in the same way, if a person can take themselves and elevate themselves, Muqaddas Ardabili, we looked at the last time, was the tradition. Muqaddas Ardabili was so muqaddas as a person. He says one day he was going on pilgrimage to Mecca from Najaf, and the route by road is difficult. And as it happened, somebody said, can you take this letter for me and drop it halfway? He took the letter and he realized, when I borrowed or hired this horse, I hired it for myself and my luggage, not for this letter. He walked. Wow. They gave it Muqaddas. Why? Because he felt that I have a responsibility. You know what that Muqaddas said Dabili one day? He says one day he was walking and a rider comes to him. This is in the 16th, 17th century, not long ago. Right in the time of Sheikh Baha'i and Mullah Sadr. Muqaddas Ardebili also lived in that time. You've probably seen portraits of him with a Muqaddas Ardebili was walking. A rider comes. He says, where are you going? He says, I'm going in that direction. He says, why don't you come on? Gets on the horse. He says, let's go. Begins to ride his horse. The rider says to him, he says, where are you from? He says, I live in Najaf, but I'm originally from Ardabil. He says, do you know Mullah Fulan in Ardabil? He says, yeah, I know him. He's a really good guy. He goes, okay. He goes, do you know this guy? He says, yeah. One by one, he starts listing the guy. Slowly, the rider comes and he says, Muqaddas, do you know, he says, Sheikh Ahmed, do you know a guy by the name of Muqaddas Ardebili? He puts his head down and he says, you know, you're calling him Muqaddas, but he's fighting with his nafs. He's not as good as people make him out to be. And he put himself down. So the rider, as he was riding, looks at him and he says, Sheikh Ahmed, had you not been what I described you as, you wouldn't be sitting on the horse of the 12th Imam. Wow. So there are signs and people like that. It's not something which is a distant. Even within this day and age, there are ulama, there are people out there who have that access. You know, we were saying, I don't know if we were saying it here or saying somewhere else, but there are 360 people who are in direct contact with the 12th Imam alayhi salam. You know, we feel him, we know him, we see him. I don't need somebody to come and bring me proofs. As a practical follower of the Ahlebait, I know my Imam. Yeah. I don't need somebody to say this is the proof and that's the proof and you know what, he's not born yet or he is born yet. I don't need, for example, various, you know, Sunni ulama who believe that he's born for me to believe that he's born just because they believe that he's born. No. Yeah. Me as the follower of the Ahlebait believes that the Imam is, although there is a huge group of, Ibn Arabi was one of them, he believed. He said the 12th Imam is alive. He believed him as the 12th. He is the son of Imam Hassan al-Asghari alayhi salam. In Futuhat al-Makki there's an entire chapter which is for Imam Mahdi. There's an entire bab which is there. So the idea is not the fact that there's a difference between a Sunni and a Shia, but I don't need somebody to tell me that the Imam exists. If I'm a follower of the Imam, I need to connect myself. Proof essentially does not come from books always. Yes, it's good intellectually, but proof comes from inside. So we need to build ourselves. It's like the example that Ayatollah Wahid gives. He says that, look, you know what? You've got a brick wall, right? Sun keeps on shining on the brick wall, 24/7. What happens? The brick wall remains the brick wall. Says, but on a mountain the sun shines. Let's say you go to Mashhad or something, or you go to, let's say, Nishapur. Nishapur, the sun is shining on the mountain. It says that 200 meters in the mountain there's a stone, and the stone is being polished because of that light which is permeating through all of those 200 meters. And when you pull it out, you call it a Firoza, and the most expensive Firoza in the world is Nishapuri. Why? That's us. The Shias, in that tradition, it says our Shias, when they're tested, they shine. So don't be afraid of being tested, but build that connection with the Imam. You know the Imam's going to answer. You know the du'as are going to be taken up. You just need to build that connection. So yeah, so coming back, refer back again. The idea is that the Imam has all of these characteristics. He has all of those things which are found in other prophets, and his life is parallel to some of them as well. But when he comes, that's when, in the same way Solomon had a kingdom, the Imam will have a kingdom. But he will need all of these characteristics because every prophet did something to an extent. Yeah. They didn't complete the cycle. Completion means absolute perfection, completion in society. That the 12th Imam has, nobody else has that. Akhir al-Zaman is that time when the Imam comes and he flips the world into harmony. Wow. And that's not happened before. So when the Imam comes, it's not happened before. That's the difference. Hence, he's the successor to all of these prophets because all of their characteristics are needed to take it. He's not a prophet, he's an Imam. But the fact is that he is a manifestation of the final prophet because the final prophet says he's like me. Yeah. That means that, what does like me mean? The best prophet, all of the prophets on one side, the final prophet on the other side. His manifestation, obviously, in creation is going to be the best. He's the perfect man, and the perfect man is the universe. When you look at the face of the perfect man's face is the Arsh of Allah. The perfect man's face is Isma Azam. It is through the perfect man that everything is created. So the 12th Imam is the seal of perfection, the seal of Wilaya. He's the seal of the awliya. He's the seal of the Imams. He's the best in creation. And he's the one who all of the Imams have waited for. And he is the one in Usul al-Kafi says, he was in the shadows when the torture took place. In the tradition it says, when it took place on the Ahlebait. Now whether it was on Hazrat Zahra or Imam Hussein, there's a tradition. It says that the angels began to cry, said to Allah, Allah, what's happening? Why is this? From the shadows there was a shadow there, and there was an existence there. Allah says that he will come to avenge all of this. So he is the avenger of all of this.
You mentioned how there's a particular aspect to Imam Mahdi alayhi salam that's distinct. And obviously we've discussed the similarities he has to the previous prophets and the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and you said Sayyid al-Shuhada in terms of the inheritance. In terms of distinction, they say at the end of times there's a hadith that says when the Imam alayhi salam comes, it will be to such an extent as if he's brought a new religion. What is this aspect of this, what is it about this term new religion? That, is it something that's literally going to be new because of a modernization of society? Or is it something that is literally, the religions over time we've lost the essence of its meaning, so he's going to take it back to the essence of what it was?
I think we can answer in a number of ways. The first thing is that what is essentially religion? Religion is a move back to the fitrah, the primordial nature, the first nature of man. Society would have moved so far away from the actual origin that it would seem like a new religion that he's come to preach to bring you back again. Isn't that what's happening today? When you look at fundamentalism, when you look at the killings and atrocities taking place in the world in the name of Islam, is that Islam? Where has the intellectual development gone? You see, Islam was a religion historically of intellectual development. It wasn't one of war, it wasn't one of barbarity. So what's happened? We've gone against the fitrah of man. Killing is against the fitrah of man. Causing bloodshed is against the fitrah of man. We've been created in the surah of Allah, which means that we have the akhlaq of Allah within us, which we need to polish. So as society moves away, we've become selfish. Muslims, non-Muslims, the world generally, we are living in a world which is based upon the human nafs. What is the system of Dajjal? The system of Dajjal is based on the nafs. It is the idea of the exploitation of the nafs. This is why they say that Dajjal will have two weapons. When he comes, two weapons. First one is music. Through music he intoxicates people and brings them towards false sense of lull. That's what music gives you. And the second thing is in the tradition, it says he brings women, but the idea of women is shahwa. Women or men both. It's the idea of sexual exploitation which is taking place today within our societies. Yeah. The use of human body, the use of skin to be able to influence people. And what does that do? False sense of lull. You lose reality because you're following your hawa nafs. That's Dajjal. What does that mean? He's taken you away from your fitrah towards animalism. And what is insan created for? To go towards becoming malakuti, to go towards becoming angelic. So it's the polar opposite. Now when the Imam comes and he takes you from one extreme to the other extreme, what does it seem like to you? It's about another religion.
You mentioned how the system of Dajjal is about the I, it's about the ego and destroying this. One aspect of it is the music and the other aspect is the shahwa. And that concept takes us away from the actual origination of our creation, the purpose of our creation, which leads us to, when the Imam alayhi salam comes, it's as if he's going to bring a new religion. How is it that we live in a way in this time to go back to that origin so that when he comes it's not a foreign concept to us?
There's a story in the Quran, kind of just came to my mind now actually, so I might as well discuss it. It says Musa goes for 40 days and he goes and does spiritual exercises. And it gets to a stage whereby Musa develops himself, and afterwards he goes towards, or he gets called by God and he takes off his shoes and he goes into the valley. And then Allah basically says to, or Musa says to Allah, God, I want to see you. I want to see you. And he says, Lan tarani, you won't see me. Allah then manifests himself on the mountain and the mountain is destroyed completely into dust. Musa swoons and he falls down, and as he falls down he gets up and he says, expresses the fact that I've now become of the first believers, I'm the utmost of the believers. So the question is asked, right? It says, we know we can't see God. You think Musa, a prophet, can't? He doesn't know that? When an intelligent person makes a claim that seems to be unintelligent, there's a hikmah behind that. Musa is a person who's an intelligent person. He's a prophet, he's got direct link with God. What is Allah teaching him, and why did he say that? Scholars answer it this way, ulama, urafa. They said Musa wanted to break away and to unite with God. Let's put it in our way. We want to move away from the system of the Dajjal, the one eye. What does the one eye symbolize? The I-ness of man, one. I-ness, me, but at the same time is blinded to the reality because it's only shahwa, it's not intellect.
Yeah.
So in this way, I-ness, Allah, I want to see you. Allah says, you can't see me. What does that mean? Mountain has crumbled. Or if I say the mountain symbolizes the human I-ness, the ego. As long as Musa was I want to see you, I can never see you. It is only when you destroy the I that swooning you go down. Allah crushed his ego, destroyed the mountain to powder. What does that mean? That meant because the mountain is still there, you go, Sinai is still there. What does it mean to be destroyed into powder? It means that his nafs was destroyed. And when he fell down and he realized the tajalli of Allah, that's when he says, and I'm of the greatest, or I'm the first of the believers. Potentially meaning what? Meaning that as long as the I-ness exists, you cannot go back to the point of origin. So in really fat terms, if you were to summarize it, if man wants to go back to that origin, it needs for him to break the I-ness. When the ego breaks, only then can you connect with God. Now break it down. Not everybody's created for that. Not everybody realizes that. See, the fact is that the Sharia has been created for a reason. And the reason of the Sharia is one fold. It's to give us parameters to weaken the I-ness and to build balance within ourselves. And I think the most important thing that we can do is to build that balance. And I know it's very simple to say, but I think that it requires us to educate ourselves as to what God wants from us. Sharia is the parameters, but more than that, we need to study akhlaq to understand. For example, the sixth Imam, when he breaks down living into 4 parts, spend a time for this, spend a time for this, spend a time for this. Why? Because he's developing a balanced intellectual human being. And they're characteristics that have been told to us that if you have these characteristics, it's as if you're moving away from God, delaying your prayers, for example. Dhikrullah, the remembrance of God decreases. Essentially, we need to study, educate ourselves, have a timetable so that we are educating ourselves in the Islamic sciences. And at the same time, we are focusing on ourselves to develop ourselves in terms of religion and the world. So I think it's a package where 2 things come together. I don't think it's as easy as that. It's easy and it's not easy. We seriously need to work hard on ourselves. It's not the fact that it's just going to come overnight. It's going to appear like that. It's impossible to take it lightly. I think that in insan or man, we have to break our lives down. We have to educate ourselves, and we have to have that focus. It's important to have a focus. What is the focus? Let's say, for example, God. Let's say the focus is the Imam. If you are working for the Imam, then you find things then settle into place. You need a structure. It goes back to the whole thing. Structure, vision, aim, focus. There are a lot of things which are required. And I think for that, the most important thing is education. What should we educate ourselves in? We need to study akhlaq. We need to study ahkam to know we need to study our belief system. Islamic education on a level is important for all of us. And at the same time, we need to work hard within our every day-to-day life as well to polish ourselves. Discipline, that's what's important. If we don't have that discipline, you find everything else crumbles. So if you want to move back to your fitrah, it's not just about going into a mountain and chanting. It's not about that. It's about living with the people, but organizing your life in such a way that through this organization you come closer to God. It's a holistic way of realization. And that would mean to go on your ziyaras, to reconnect with the Aimma, to go on Hajj, to go on Umrah, to go to Medina. All of these things, visit the grave of the Prophet. All of these things come under a holistic way of living, helping other people, giving service. It's a way of living. Now, if I was to list one by one, it wouldn't make sense. But I think that to bring all of this together and not to expand it too much, education.
Okay.
We need to educate ourselves.
Education. And I love how you said about the perfection, as in to be followers of the perfect man, we in ourselves have to strive in our lives to reach that perfection in whatever field that is. Like you said, it's not limited, it's in every aspect of our life. You mentioned about the ego, and just for the viewer's sake, you said it's to destroy that ego. Now, the ego, obviously, as we know, it's not a physical concept. But what is the physical way of us dealing with this concept that's not physical?
So the question is, what is the ego? You find in a verse of the Quran that says, "Inna nafsa la'amaratan bis-su' illa ma rahma rabbi." It's a very famous verse that Yusuf alayhi salam says. And he talks about really that the nafs amara, so this lowly nafs, this lowly soul which takes you towards corruption, is only prevented from taking you to corruption with the mercy of the Creator. So essentially, what is this, the nafs? The nafs is that thing which attaches us to the world. Man is created of two components: the divine, for example, the rational side of man, or the malakuti side of man, link with the world, the dunya. The nafs, for example, according to Mullah Sadra, essentially was physical. Through harkat al-jawhari, through this movement, became immaterial. But the fact is that the nafs itself is the attachment to the world that we have. And the world includes those animalistic desires and the lust and the thirst for these four walls, which we call the world, the dunya. So how do we physically combat that? Firstly, we need to latch on to the mercy of God. How do we do that? Our prayers, our visitation to ziyarah and hajj, fasting. You find that people cannot get to any maqam without fasting, because what fasting does is it breaks the nafs. If you look at the fadila of fasting, especially in the month of Ramadan, you've got so many traditions about breaking the nafs. How do you break the nafs? And even if you go to Ihya Ulumuddin, Ghazali is a very famous Sunni scholar. He talks about the three things when it comes to the nafs. The tongue, because the tongue harbors the majority of sins. You close your mouth and you find that you end up moving maqams like anything. You spiritually, because of the tongue. Majority of sins, the tongue. To control the tongue, to control the stomach, the food that we intake, and to control our sensual desires. So there are three things that you need to target to be able to control that. Firstly, in what you speak, limit your talk, and we can look at programs again. This program is not sufficient to cover all of that. The food that you eat, the halal and the tayyib and all of these kind of different things. We have big debates about and all that, but it's important. What we eat, how we eat it. When should we, for example, Imam Khomeini's teacher suggests to him, advises him, look, only have meat twice a week. Why not every single day? What is the effect of food on us? It's an entire chapter on its own. And then finally, sensual desires. How to limit your lust. I mean, one doesn't say exterminate your lust, he says limit your lust. How to limit your lust. So we're not talking about, when we talk about destruction, we're not talking about absolutely finishing everything of ours and becoming robots. No, it's not like that. It's about controlling and balancing, which is important. So when it comes to the nafs, practically, the tongue, the stomach, and the desires need to be. What techniques do we have? Fasting is the best thing. Fasting. We can break that. Fasting is the reward. The reward of fasting is Allah. As-sawmu li wa ana ujzi bih. Allah is saying, the reward for fasting is Allah. Essentially, the reward for every other thing is Jannah, but fasting is Allah. And there's a huge philosophy, and inshallah, one day we'll look at the philosophy behind fasting. Abstaining. Every action that you do for Allah is an action. Fasting is the only thing which is hidden. Every action, Zahir, Allahu Akbar, and you start your prayers. Yeah. Sadaqah, Hajj. Fasting is the only thing which is batin. So at the same time, nobody knows. You're not meant to disclose the fact that you're fasting. So fasting is that one thing that breaks the nafs. And from fasting, you find that the more you fast, the major sins are destroyed, the power is built inside of you, your speech decreases. But the most important thing is that control of speech then after that. Fasting and the control of speech, and you'll see that you have then dominance over your nafs. That's one of the best ways and the basic ways that one can develop and to essentially move forward practically in defeating that nafs. One issue then comes, complacency. And if you are pious and if you are working hard, if you're staying away from sins, shaitan then hits you on one way, other way, it makes you lazy. And you find that a lot of religious people are very lazy. Make sure then you don't fall into the bracket of being lazy. Make sure that you are working hard and you have a timetable life. Piety doesn't mean to spend hours on the musalla or in the mihrab. Your war, mihrab basically the place of war, your war is what? Jihad al-nafs. And jihad al-nafs comes out when you actually practically go in and and you do your responsibility. So we need to not get complacent as the more pious we become. It is important for us to make sure that we are working in the way that we're working, and it's important for us to work harder. The more pious you become, the more towards God you go, it then becomes more essential for you to work harder. So really, that's in a practical sense of the word. That is what we believe. That's what I believe. That is the best thing that you can do to practically curb the ego in preparing ourselves for the coming back of that perfect man who each one of us are waiting for.
Thank you very much for that very in-depth answer. In the religion, and specifically in the time of the Holy Prophet, peace upon him, and as revelation came, you see within the Quran there's this difference between a Muslim and a mu'min. So the one who submits and the believer, as a rough translation. In this application of these things that you're saying and the destroying of the ego, you've mentioned the fasting, the stomach, and the sensual desires as 3 things that we need to curb to destroy that, as an aid to destroy the ego. But is there a difference as to what levels you can attain, and what is the ultimate striving for perfection? Like you said, there's a balance there. But between the Muslim and the mu'min, is there, do those words kind of describe different levels of that attaining of perfection?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very good question. I think this will be a final question. God does actually, you look in the Quran and you find that there is a system in place. You know, for example, you come into Islam, as you rightly said, the Muslim, the mu'min, the one who is, you know, as they say, I'm trying to think of the translation of it. You know, you've got the mukhlisin, the mukhlasin. So there are different categories and developments of people. The highest level basically is the one who is sincere. Sincerity becomes a state of being for that person. So the highest level for a believer is not just a mu'min. The highest level of the believer is the one who is at absolute level of, one could say, sincerity. His being emanates sincerity, right, towards God. Essentially, all of this pathway, what is the summary of this pathway? The pathway of the summary of the pathway is to become an abd of Allah, abdullah. That's it. Is to become a true servant. How do you become a true servant? When you sincerely do everything for the purpose of God, and at the same time, not just that, so you do everything sincerely for the purpose of God. It lies within servitude to God, and that's where, inshallah, maybe next time we'll look at the hadith of Unwan al-Basri, the most mystical tradition that you'll find. One of the most mystical, that the Imam then expresses how to become a true servant of God. What does it mean? A spiritual journey, maqam. But anyhow, so to become a true servant of God requires sincerity and requires the realization of your poverty in front of God. Fukhara, that's what the Quran says. Nahnu fukhara, we are fakir in Allah. Or to God, or each one of us with God are paupers. We're to understand that nothing happens without the movement of God. It's important. So now if you look at what is the 12th Imam, the 12th Imam itself is a true servant of God, putting everything in the hands of God. And that's what it is. We need to become true servants in the way that we put everything in the hands of God. Our movement is based upon godliness, which means that we have understood that we are poor in front, we are beggars in front of God. The minute you understand the maqam of being a beggar in front of God and you completely and sincerely submit to that, is when you gain all the power of the universe. It's when Allah gives you everything. It's just that realization. And then you realize nothing can touch me, nothing can affect me, nothing can hurt me, nothing but God. And that's it.
Thank you very much.
المهدي قادم قادم ناصر ناصر للثروات المهدي ثائر ثائر شاهد شاهد سيف الثار المهدي فجر للأحرار المهدي أمل يطلق في الدنيا غيران المهدي يصبح